Welcome, everybody. Before we get into our guests for the day, I just wanted to do a quick couple of housekeeping points. Because of the fall economic update, the 21st will be no meeting. So we had actually scheduled either the 19th or the 21st for supplementaries. So that gives us no choice but to do the supplementaries on the 19th, and we've extended an invitation to the minister. And then, so we have our constituency next week. So the 19th, we'll have minister. We're still trying to finalize first hour, second hour. I'm not sure. No meeting on the 21st. And then on the 26th will be fun and exciting. We will have Google/YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Yeah. So that'll be an exciting day.
That's the 26th?
26th. Okay. Any questions on that? No? Good. Okay. So, okay. All right. Let's focus here. So today we have with us a briefing with the Chief Statistician of Canada, Anil Aurora, the Chief Statistician, with Andre Loranger, Assistant Chief Statistician, Economic Statistics, Linda Howatson-Leo, Director, Office of Privy Management and Information Coordination. And before we begin, I just want to point out. So normally I'm pretty easy with the time. I just want to make sure that you guys are paying attention because I will follow the time sharply. So I don't want to have to cut people off, but I want to make sure that everybody gets the chance to ask whatever questions that they would like. So having said that, Mr. Aurora, you have 7 minutes to enthrall us.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Deputy Chairs, and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you information on Statistics Canada pilot project on using financial transaction records to provide timely and quality data on our economy and society.
I'd like to immediately dispel 3 major inaccuracies of the pilot project to enhance the statistical system using payments data. Firstly, no data has been collected by Statistics Canada as it pertains to this pilot project. I repeat, nothing has been collected. 2, trust is the foundation of how Statistics Canada operates, and we will continue to earn the trust of Canadians. And thirdly, I can assure you that this project will not proceed until we have addressed the privacy concerns of Canadians and the Privacy Commissioner has done his work. As you may be aware, Statistics Canada, like many national statistical organizations around the world, is undertaking a comprehensive modernization effort. This modernization effort will redefine how we gather and deliver data by using leading-edge methods, by leveraging existing administrative sources, by excelling at our core competencies of data integration, e-collection, and big data processing. Continuous evolution and innovation has made the agency a world leader in the field of statistics. In all of this, of course, I want to underline that Statistics Canada respects the rightful privacy of Canadians and has always devoted itself to doing so. We understand and respect the concerns being expressed by Canadians about accessing their personal information. The modernization of Statistics Canada began in earnest in the summer of 2017 when the vision for modernizing Statistics Canada was publicly announced. This was followed by a Budget 2018 announcement of funding $51.3 million to support Statistics Canada's modernization. I want to underline that the issue in front of us today is not simply an academic one. Statistics have far-reaching implications for all Canadians. Diminished quality will have direct impacts on Canadians. For example, estimates of household spending are used in part to derive the Consumer Price Index. The CPI is in turn used to index pensions and old age security, directly impacting the income of seniors. It is also used to help establish wage rates and labor contracts, employment insurance, and policies designed to address things like poverty. Provinces and territories also depend on quality data to appropriate HST revenue that fund necessary public sector services such as healthcare and infrastructure. The allocation of these funds is in large part determined by the level of household spending on taxable goods in each province and territory. The Bank of Canada uses our statistics to set interest rates and monitor inflation. The methods by which Statistics Canada traditionally collects data from Canadians are falling short of what Canadians demand of us today. Home phones have been replaced by smartphones. Taxis compete with ride-sharing apps, and withdrawal and deposit slips that used to be filled out at banks have been replaced with online financial transactions. The pace at which Canadians are adopting digital services accelerated rapidly. Today, we email money, and we get our food delivered through the use of an app. 80% of all financial transactions are done electronically, some 21 billion of them in 2016 alone. As a matter of fact, following the global financial crisis in 2008-9, there's been an increased demand for more timely and detailed data to better understand our income, wealth, and consumption, and how these are distributed in Canada with segments of society which are more vulnerable, and how resilient these groups are to changing economic conditions. The Governor of the Bank of Canada, Stephen Poloz, said recently, "We know that cross-border supply chains have complicated the task of gathering accurate data on trade. Digital technologies are making it even easier to fragment production globally. And digital ordering, payments, and service delivery are making it easier for transactions to occur that fall below custom reporting thresholds or are missing altogether. In today's digital world, Canadians can order goods at any time from anywhere. So a simple question such as, what did you spend on clothing, becomes very complex to answer. As household purchases become increasingly complex and the volume of transactions multiply, the burden on citizens to explain, track, and report these activities and transactions via surveys is becoming unsustainable. Over the last year, we've been actively engaging Canadians about the type of data they need from Statistics Canada. We've consulted Canadians at 176 different sessions over the past year, and they told us there's an overwhelming need and demand for the work Statistics Canada undertakes. In fact, we recently completed a week-long national consultation in every corner of this country with a full range of stakeholders. Users of Statistics Canada were very clear. Canadians want more data from us, not less. They're seeking city and neighbourhood level data. They expect Statistics Canada to be able to tell them whether single-parent senior citizens and low-income households in their cities have the necessary resources to meet their basic needs for shelter at a time of increasing interest rates. Businesses need better data on consumer spending patterns to grow and serve their customers. While our traditional methods are becoming more challenging, fortunately, the information that we require to develop precise income and spending measures exists in administrative records. In that context, I'd like to move on to the second part of my remarks to briefly describe the pilot project and outline our discussions with the Canadian Bankers Association and financial institutions over the course of this last year. And let me be clear, this is a pilot. It was still under discussion, and it has not been implemented yet, and no data has been received by Statistics Canada. Early in 2018, Statistics Canada initiated a pilot project to determine if the financial information held by financial institutions could be used to help address data quality concerns and data gaps. An important part of this work was to determine if the digital information captured by the payment system had statistical value and if it could be used to address these emerging data gaps while protecting privacy and confidentiality. Statistics Canada a rencontré l'association.
Statistics Canada met and corresponded with the Canadian Bankers Association and financial institutions on multiple occasions, 12 times since April 2018, to outline a high-level pilot project and determine the conditions under which the required data could be obtained.
And the financial institutions have been committed to a process that would protect the privacy of Canadians right from the onset. The project is designed to follow rigorous methodological principles and privacy by design elements. Selected households would be assigned an anonymized statistical number developed by Statistics Canada. The bank would then be asked to go through its payment information and extract records from a statistical sample of selected dwellings or addresses. The current design proposes that the institution create two files. One file contains the anonymized statistical number and the personal information, and a second file would contain the anonymized statistical number and the financial information without the personal information. The current design proposes that these two separate files would be transferred to Statistics Canada. Statistics Canada would process the two files separately. Once the demographic information, such as type of household or age of the head of the household, is added, the personal information received from the banks would be deleted. We would then take the second file containing the financial transaction data and code them to expenditure categories. It would then join the household demographic information with the coded financial transaction data using the anonymized statistical number that I talked about. Let me be clear, it would be impossible to associate the financial records, the transactions, with a given individual or household from this joined file. We've been clear on the need to be fully transparent with Canadians, that information was to be provided to Statistics Canada and the reason for doing so. We asked that the banks inform their customers that Statistics Canada was requesting this information in August of this year. While the notion of data for 500,000 addresses may seem large, there are over 14 million households in Canada. The chance that a given address is selected as part of our sample is 1 in 28. The chance that the dwelling is used in the actual sample is 1 in 40. The long-form census, by comparison, has a 1 in 4 sample. We will rotate this sample from year to year so that a history of information for any one household is not possible. The sophisticated design has been guided by the very helpful input of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. To put this in perspective, in 2016, as I said, the Canadian payment system processed over 21 billion transactions. Our pilot project sample proposes to access less than 2% of these transactions, each of which has been anonymized and stripped of any personal identifiers. My third and final point is around the current status of the pilot and next steps. Mr. Chair, as I said at the outset, Statistics Canada takes the privacy of Canadians very, very seriously. We have a strong record and reputation on privacy, and we understand the concerns of Canadians. Statistics Canada has worked hard to build the trust of Canadians for 100 years, providing us with some of their most personal information. Nous avons écouté les préoccupations de l'Association des banquiers canadiens.
We listened to Canadians' concerns, as well as parliamentarians.
Of the complaints received by the OPC, Office of the Privacy Commissioner, will further guide the design of this project. We continue to engage with the CBA and financial institutions, and their advice will further help strengthen the privacy protections of this project. I can assure you that we will not proceed with this project until we have addressed the privacy concerns expressed by Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And we're going to go right into questions with Ms. Cedar Chauvin. You have 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Canadians and many of my riding are concerned about their personal data and want to ensure that it's secure and protected. Canadians have also trusted Statistics Canada, and I'll use StatsCan from this point forward, for years to use their data to improve lives. And I thank you for your service. I have many questions that are not meant to be offensive or to offend, and many come from my constituents. I hope you could keep your answers as brief as possible. Can you tell me if I got my coffee this morning from Tim Hortons or Starbucks?
No, I can't.
Okay. Do you want to monitor Canadians' every move?
No.
Is this data project a surveillance scheme in disguise?
No.
Are you a spy?
No.
Could the government spy on Canadians using StatsCan data?
No.
Could the Liberal government spy on Canadians using StatsCan data?
No.
Can StatsCan be compelled to share identifiable personal information with the government?
No.
Can StatsCan be compelled to share identifiable personal information with the Liberal government?
No.
Can StatsCan be compared to share identifiable personal information with a member of the opposition?
No.
Can Statistics Canada be compelled to share identifiable personal information with any politician?
No.
Can Statistics Canada be compelled to share identifiable personal information with the courts?
No.
Can Statistics Canada be compelled to share identifiable personal information with the RCMP?
No.
Can Statistics Canada be compelled to share identifiable personal information with Canada Revenue Agency?
No.
Can StatsCan be compelled to share identifiable personal information with CSIS?
No.
How many data files have been hacked from Statistics Canada databases?
None.
When has Statistics Canada lost data in transfer?
None. Never.
Why is StatsCan requesting household spending and income data from our financial institutions?
Well, I could just identify 4 very quick reasons why. One,
Please.
is that declining response rates from our major source of survey, the Canadian Household Spending Survey, it's sitting at about 40% today, just isn't giving us the timely and the detailed data that we need. We are seeing gaps because of the consumption of digital services in Canada, and that is a real gap for us. Our modernization agenda is all about experimentation and piloting, of which this is one of them, where we're looking for new ways to fill those gaps. And we've demonstrated that when we do use administrative data, like as we've done with our housing gap that we've had, that we can actually provide good quality and timely data to Canadians.
How long have you been using administrative data?
The use of administrative data in Statistics Canada goes back to 1921 when we first started using vital statistics.
So
then it was supplemented in 1938 with trade data and so on and so on.
Yep. So you've been using surveys for quite some time. Why are you switching over to this type of data?
Well, as I said, our traditional surveys, we're seeing declining response rate. Canadians are busy. Canadians, are in many cases not even reachable. They don't have landlines. There are various reasons why we're seeing the kinds of declining response rates. We have to go to administrative sources, and again, using administrative sources is not anything new to Statistics Canada.
How will Canadians benefit from this initiative?
Well, Canadians will have better quality data. They'll have it for the areas that they're interested in. Canadians don't want to just know what's going on at the Canada level or the provincial level or even at the city level. They want to know what's going on at a neighborhood level. And obviously, this is all with the protection of privacy and confidentiality that they deserve as well.
Will the data collected be given to the government in any form?
Only in aggregate form where no individual transaction or data can ever be identified.
Will the data collected be given to the opposition in any form?
Only in the aggregate form where no one's information can be
Has
identified.
StatsCan been asked to spy on Canadians?
No.
Who asked StatsCan to do this project?
Well, we've been, as I said, it's using innovative ways, new ways to get at data is nothing new to Statistics Canada. We're a world leader when it comes to this. When we hear from Canadians that our data are falling short of their needs, we'll look for new ways to get at that information, again, without ever compromising the privacy and confidentiality of Canadians.
So is it correct to say that this was internally driven from Stats Canada?
That is correct.
Did the Government of Canada ask StatsCan to start this project?
No, not any specific project per se. I think the Government of Canada has said that they have a desire to increase the quality and the timeliness of data. And I think there's been a support, as I just mentioned, for the modernization of Statistics Canada.
Can the government use this data that has been collected in any way to spy on Canadians?
No.
Can the Liberal government use this data in any way to spy on Canadians?
No.
Can the opposition members use this data in any way to spy on Canadians?
No.
Can the government use the data collected in any way to see what specifically Canadians are doing with their money?
No.
Can the Liberal government use the data collected in any way to see what Canadians are doing with their money?
No.
Can the opposition use the data collected in any way to see what Canadians are doing with their money?
No.
Can any member of the government access Statistics Canada data that has been collected?
Not in individual form, only in aggregate form, which has been completely
What do you mean
scrubbed.
when you say aggregate form?
So it's rolled up into statistics. What is the trend in a particular neighborhood? What is it for a particular segment of the population? But never about an individual, either a firm or an individual Canadian.
Can any politician access Statistics Canada data?
Only in aggregate form, never as an individual record.
Can any member of the opposition access Statistics Canada data?
Only in aggregate form, never as an individual record.
Is there any pressure from any politician to access the collected data from Statistics Canada?
No.
I will have to cut you off at that point, and we're going to move to Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief Statistician, for coming in today and for the work that you and your organization do for Canadians. I'd like to start with clarifying a few things. First of all, Many people were under the assumption that it was 500,000 individuals. In your remarks today, you said households. Are those 500,000 households or individuals?
So it's 500,000 dwellings. So our unit of measure there is a particular dwelling, and then from there we create census families, economic families, and other
What
concepts.
is the average per household?
The average household size in Canada is just under 3, I think.
Okay, so we're looking at approximately 1.5 million people that will be picked up by this sample.
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because what we are trying to do is to collect information at a neighborhood level. We know that in some neighborhoods you'll have smaller household sizes. It could be an apartment building, for example, with student residence, for example, or whatever it is, and there'll be others that are more single family.
Canadians
dwellings.
obviously, their health records, as well as their financial records, are quite important to them. And suddenly having a change in scheme, I think, has raised a lot of concern. When you are collecting this information, will it include children?
Our intent is not to include children.
How do you safeguard that if someone has a bank account and lives in that household that's selected?
Yeah, so I mean, that's why, we do need some level of personal information so that we can detect what are outliers and what are in scope.
So what if someone has a joint bank account for, let's say, a relative like an elderly mother or father that's on their own, that their name is also? Does that mean, and they live separate in a different household, will that then be caught up by your survey of that particular household?
So if we're talking about a dwelling, so if it's a multi-generational, occupied dwelling, for example, well, then that would form...
I'm not speaking about that, sir. I'm speaking about specifically other people, because some people will have joint accounts because they have control over those accounts for an elderly parent or grandparent. Will that elderly parent or grandparent be caught up because their social insurance number is tied to that bank account?
So these are, look, this is still in a design phase. It's a pilot
Would
project.
you say yes or no?
So once the data come to us, those are the kinds of things that we will look at. And there are definitions about how, what are the conditions under which a census family is formed, an economic family is formed, and those are the kinds of things that we will determine. We're not interested in an individual's transaction. We are interested in the household consumption pattern.
Okay, let's go back to the pilot project. Originally, the letter you wrote to the Banking Association did not mention anything with the pilot project. Also, I would like you to confirm, sir, that TransUnion, a credit bureau, has given Statistics Canada 27 million or so Canadians' personal information when it comes to their credit file dating back 15 years. Is that the case? Does the pilot project that you're discussing today include that? Because you've said that this pilot project has not gone forward. I'd like you to explain the reason.
Sure. Thank you for that question. Firstly, we've been very clear, both in writing as well as verbally, with the CBA, that this is a pilot project. And it still remains a pilot project in its design phase. And in terms of your question about our work with TransUnion, we have worked with them, and we worked with them over a course of a year, again in collaboration with them, to explain exactly how it is that why it is that we needed that data, how it is that we need that data, and we worked with them, and it is something that they have been very clear with their clients as well,
No,
that this
sir,
is
I don't-
data.
I don't think
You can
that's
look at
the
an
case.
individual.
Yeah, so I'd like just to move on here, because the problem that I have here is that the pilot project you're talking about with the banks is not possible without having the credit bureau information. The two are intrinsically linked. The reason being is that if, let's say, you pick a particular neighborhood randomized in Canada, you pick a household, you then use the credit bureau data to go to all the banks, and I would imagine this would also be for institutions such as credit card companies, where then you could say, we've identified this person, social insurance's number, we know that they have an account with you, we would like you to supply us all that information. So we're not just talking about bank accounts, sir, we're talking about credit card specific information. Is that correct?
So let me let me just provide some clarification. First of all, this pilot project with the financial institutions is about expenditure data, okay, and individual financial transactions that we're getting, as I said, from a 1 in 40 sample. The transactions that we get from TransUnion, for example, they're looking at the credit, and that we're using that data to look at the housing statistics and the degree to which people are over-leveraged.
Then
That is
how are you going to be able to get credit card information then? Because, for example, some people will have a checking account at a bank, but then they'll use a credit card for much of their activity. You need to get access to both information to do exactly what you're talking about. So how do you do that then, if not using the credit bureau information?
So
Because the bank that you ask that information for will not know about that credit card.
And we're not interested in matching those two, first of all. This is about household expenditure patterns. This project is about looking at what does a typical household spend in, and what did they spend that money on? And the reason why that's important, sir, is we use that expenditure pattern by a demographic profile, and their pattern then fits as the weights for our CPI project. So it tells you about, in this particular situation, a typical household spends so much on these types of services. So that when every month we go out and get prices for to feed into our consumer price index, well, then we benchmark and weight up that one commodity with, well, how much does a typical household spend on clothing or food or their mortgage or digital services? That's what this project is about.
So, but again, if you were only able to...
Time's up. You'll have time. We'll come back to you. Monsieur Bouleris, vous avez 7 minutes.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here with us today. To begin with, I want to tell you that the work you do is extremely important in developing effective public policies that reflect Canadian reality and the Quebec reality. And we strongly believe that correct data and accurate data allow us to do so. Otherwise, we're not sure what we're dealing with. And that's why we staunchly defended the long-form census, which was for us absolutely essential for Canada. That being said, you did cause some consternation. Many people are worried. Many people are concerned that at the very idea that a public institution may directly access their personal information, whether through the banks or credit card companies, makes people very nervous about their personal information. You said, and I'll begin with the consultation of citizens. In your presentation, you said that you had information sessions, that you'd spoken to people. I'm not sure who you spoke to, but it couldn't have been very many people because media, journalists the people in our riding are worried. They read this in the papers and they're shocked. So what was your consultation process to warn people about the arrival of this pilot project? First of all, I understand Canadians' concerns with respect to this pilot project. As I stated earlier, this project has not yet begun. It's still in the design phase. We are still working with stakeholders in order to establish the best way to communicate with their clients and so forth. And our intention remains to speak with Canadians in order to be completely transparent. This is something to tell them this is something that is necessary to obtain high quality data. We've done this several times in the past on other files, and that's exactly what we plan to do with this pilot project. The Privacy Commissioner indicated that she launched an investigation on your pilot project and that she is studying it. If the Privacy Commissioner decides that this does not meet the standards in protecting Canadians' personal information, what will you do? We'll see Mr. Terrien is doing his work. But are you prepared to commit to listening to the Privacy Commissioner's recommendations? Of course, we will listen to the Privacy Commissioner's recommendations. And I asked Mr. Terrien, as I said, to provide us with those recommendations because we've worked with them in designing this project. And as I said, we designed this project taking into account his recommendations. He received complaints, so he has a job to do. And if he has more recommendations for us, naturally, we will take those into account. You said that because of the way people are communicating, that there is that fewer and fewer people have fixed line telephones, that it's more difficult to reach people. You used an expression that was traditional surveys are not sustainable or are unsustainable. You're not the only organization to deal with those challenges, but we get the impression that the solution you've found, that, for example, that no polling company would want to do this, it seems fairly intrusive into Canadians' lives and their personal information and their banking information. Personally, I'm not convinced that you have found the right solution. Over the years, has Statistics Canada sent out to third parties or subcontractors mandates or the ability to collect information in order to maintain your databases at Statistics Canada, or is it all in-house, or have you outsourced any of your activities? It is something that we are doing ourselves, that we are designing it ourselves. The data will remain in our facilities, in our own documents, in our systems. Of course, everyone buys software. We do that as well. But never do we give Canadians' data to anyone else. Do you use a third party to collect data for your own purposes? No. Do you use Shared Services Canada? Shared Services Canada is, as a supplier to everyone, whose mandate is to maintain our systems, is involved in that sense, but we control our data and we control the access we give them to our data. In your opinion, is the level of security and protection of Shared Canada's protection of people's data equal to Statistics Canada's? As I said, we control our own servers, we control our own data. They have zero access to our data. You have 40 seconds left. That's fine, I'm done. Thank you. Wonderful.
Exactly 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to thank the Chief and the staff for appearing before this committee. We had unanimous consent to ask you to come here to answer some questions. We appreciate you appearing in short notice. My question is around your engagement to date with the financial institutions. Could you please delve into that a little bit more for us?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So we started working with the Canadian Bankers Association early this year, in I think just at the January-February timeframe. We've had, as I said in my opening remarks, about a dozen interactions with them, either in person or on the phone. We've shared with them the need, why we need it. We've shared with them the design of the project, as we've gotten input from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner as well. They've asked about the authorities, they've asked about the privacy concerns and so on. We've certainly tried to answer all their questions, and we still continue, as I said, to work with them on the design of this project. The design that I just laid out, the separating of the files and bringing them in, et cetera, that's something that's very clearly shared with them. We've met with them, as I said, in June and in August, with their members as well in person, and laid out, where we are. And based on that, the last meeting that we had with them, their advice was, okay, this is now time from, the association, understanding the purpose and the design, to now going deeper with each of the institutions to be able to now get at what are the unique system needs and the unique kind of, file formats and so on. So they provided us with the contacts of the people in the individual institutions, and they asked us to spell out very clearly the authorities under which we would operate. Like any other provider of information, we work with them. And we make sure that we understand their concerns, and we understand their clients' concerns, and we make sure that they are addressed so that there isn't a negative impact on their clients. That's just the way in which we operate, and it's no different, and that's how we continue to operate with them. And so as those financial institutions work with us to tell us, what are their specific needs and what are the concerns of their clients, maybe there are some, design kind of elements that we have to do that is unique to their systems, but never compromising the privacy or the confidentiality of the individual transactions that we will get access to.
Thank you. So in your engagement with these financial institutions, was there any discussion of informing their clients about your pilot project?
Yes, absolutely. In August, we made it very clear to them. We asked them to ensure that, as we roll out this project, which hasn't rolled out yet, that informing their clients is an important element, and to let them know that Statistics Canada may, because we're talking about a sample, as I said, a 1 in 40 chance. So we let them know that yes, this is a legitimate purpose. This is what it's used for. And how it's to be communicated to their now they have their own systems of they have their own consent, et cetera, that they do. They'll have that's the kind of work that we have to do still, and we were fully intending on working out and elaborating a public communications and a rollout plan. So that's kind of where we are today.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to share some time with Majid as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir, for coming here and sharing your insight into the pilot project. Let me ask a couple of questions. Number one is, can you tell me the benefit that you are trying to get from this pilot project? And I'd like to expand on that one and get into really what the scope of the pilot project is. I understand the stakeholders, and I understand some of the demographic that you're going in, but what were you trying to achieve by initiating this pilot project? What is the benefit that you're going to give us?
Well, there are numerous benefits. First of all, as I said, the quality of the data that's coming from our traditional methods is not meeting the needs of
Can you give us an example?
You're right. And so let me talk about seniors, for example. Let me then talk about a business person that wants to expand their business, or even just somebody who's kind of between two jobs.
Let's say seniors pension would be an excellent example you give me.
So the amount that a person receives as part of their old age benefit, their pension, et cetera, and whether it's enough, it's in a sense to keep them, to be able to keep them sustained, is dependent upon the rate of inflation. So it's indexed in a sense, and it's then benchmarked to how much prices are either going up or not in certain categories. So the amount that individual will receive on an ongoing basis is determined by the work that we do. So the better we are at actually benchmarking the types of services and the consumptions Canadians have, the better the data are for that to be benchmarked. Similarly, as I said, for a business that, a business person that wants to expand their business, they want to know about what is the ability of that in that particular neighborhood to be able to consume differently, and what is that consumption pattern, what are they consuming, so that they can then decide whether it makes sense for them to expand or not, or maybe to another area to expand. You got people who are holding multiple jobs these days. How are they, procuring the services? Let's say they could be participating in the gig economy. They may be an Uber driver and maybe renting out their place under Airbnb. To be able to understand what is a social safety net, what are the vulnerabilities? These are the kinds of questions that policymakers ask of us.
I'm definitely impacted as a member of parliament, as an individual, by the increase in the interest rate. How will your analysis would be able to help me as a consumer be able to deal with, situations that may arise as a
You
result
got about
of the
15
increased
seconds
rates.
to answer that question.
Well, you'll have better data at a local level to understand the implications of, let's say, rising in interest rates.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Lloyd. You have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the testimony today. As we all know in this room, this issue has been quite a political firestorm over the past few weeks, and I just wanted to know, did you or your office coordinate in advance of this meeting today with any members of Parliament, ministers, or ministerial staffers regarding your appearance at committee today?
We, of course, have kept our minister's office in the loop on the fact that we're coming to this committee, but, these remarks are my own.
Okay, I appreciate that. Next, some of my constituents have raised this issue. Does Statistics Canada provide aggregate data to private for-profit companies?
So, first of all, most of everything that we produce in terms of aggregate statistics, we do it so that people can use good data rather than the alternative, and we put it on our website.
But is there instances where data has been sold to companies?
We do, from time to time, get a request from a company, for example, which says, your standard table, puts it this way by this way by this way. And really what we want to do is to have it, a different rendition, if you like, or we want it for, a different geography because my geography is different than your
But do
geography.
these companies pay Statistics Canada
So-
for that data and you configure it in the way that they ask you to configure it?
So our starting point is we recover the costs of being able to customize that request to their needs using the aggregate data that we have. We feel that taxpayers should not be subsidizing the cost of a unique or an individual's request. So it's a cost recovery.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I come from a millennial generation, and when I use Facebook or Google or any of these platforms, there's always these long terms of agreement that come ahead of time, and various instances where they ask me for my consent when I'm asking, like, do they want to know where my location is? I have the option to consent to that or not. And why is Statistics Canada in this pilot project not given Canadians the same option to consent?
Thank you for that question. We know that people who consent look different than those that don't consent. And when you get at local areas for which you need good quality data, or if you want to now know about a target population, what is happening and how are seniors impacted or how are single parents impacted by certain things, the cross product, if you like, of that low level of geography and a particular targeted subpopulation just requires a higher level of quality of data. I mean,
Participation, you're saying.
So it's no different than the census long form debate that this country had. We know that, as I said, those that consent, the profile of those is different than the ones that don't consent. And so our ability to essentially be able to account for those that don't consent it just doesn't allow itself to be substituted or weighted up, if you like, to those that do, because those that consent don't look like the one. So and we know that the youth don't participate. We know that in many cases single parents are too busy and they can't participate. And so we miss data in many cases for the very audiences that policymakers are trying to get a better handle.
So with that, though, do you believe that Canadians should be, you don't believe that Canadians should not be allowed to refuse consent for Statistics Canada information?
Well, look, as I said before, one, we understand the concerns of Canadians. Okay, we get it. We deal with sensitive data all the time. This is.
But if a Canadian writes to you and says, "I explicitly do not want Statistics Canada to have this information," would you respect their request?
We have give or take 400 programs in Statistics Canada. Many of them are mandatory, and many of them are voluntary. And the difference simply is, as I explained earlier, what is the level of precision, what is the level of accuracy, what is the level of geography to which this information is needed.
Well,
so in some cases, it's good enough to have it at a Canada level or a provincial level. In some cases, information such as this that really matters for issues that are important to Canadians, we have to have high quality data.
Some jurisdictions, though, I think of the UK, have introduced models, nudge models, where it's not that you're automatically considered to have consented unless you explicitly say that I do not consent. Why has that not been considered as a model for Statistics Canada?
So first of all, what we're doing, what Statistics Canada is consistent with what most modern statistical agencies in the world do. They have carve-outs from Privacy Acts, PIPEDA, et cetera, for statistical purposes. And it's only for statistical purposes that we can, in fact, go and get at representative data, even in some cases without consent.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Longfield. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Aurora. This is a great conversation. I used to use the CanSIM reports when I was in business, and the Canadian paper industry was going through transition. I reported to board of directors in Europe that said, where are your emerging markets that will substitute the business you were doing in the paper industry? We looked at wind turbines, we looked at steel mills. So we went and had some of those customized reports and paid the cost for those. But in terms of our business, it was very important to have good data. And Europe seemed to always have one step ahead of us on data, and I had to report to Europe. So as a Canadian business director, it made it difficult for me. And then now I look at the labor force surveys and I wait for the Friday that they come out. Because in my riding, we have 3.6% unemployment, a lot of stress on business to find workers. We need data for the business community in my riding. And then the not-for-profits that are working on poverty elimination, and they're looking for data. And they were more concerned than I was when the long-form census was canceled. When we went from the long-form census being voluntary, from mandatory to voluntary, what was the impact on data? The people in the not-for-profit sector said, now we're drifting. We don't know where we're at. Could you maybe let us know what happened there?
Sure. I've done a few censuses in my life. So I can tell you that when we went back and from the 2016 results, went back and looked at what were the results in 2006 and what were the results in 2016 and where was the 2011 National Household Survey results, we can see the impact, if you like, of what I was saying earlier, the impact of people that respond and that don't. And we know that for approximately 1,126 communities out of 5,000 communities, the data for that level of detail was just not good enough for the kinds of needs that Canadians have.
Right. So communities, because of their size, became invisible, and so some of our most vulnerable communities didn't get serviced, is what you were saying.
Well, in many cases, we had to basically kind of take it up to the next level of geography because we just weren't confident with the level of information at that smaller level. And we do know, as I said, that the prevailing traits, if you like, of the population start to get amplified, when you don't have enough detail.
Right. And I'm thinking in terms of expenditures, when you're in northern or remote communities, you're going to have a different mix of expenditures that would cause us to look at different types of social programs in order to support them. And really, that's what we're trying to get to.
Clearly, somebody living in Whitehorse or Resolute Bay has a very different, cost and a profile for their clothing and their food and their shelter than somebody living in downtown, Toronto or Vancouver.
So I was working on another project with our downtown. Guelph is a designated places to grow. We're looking at getting 8,000 people into the downtown. We're looking at creating 4,000 jobs in the downtown. The downtown businesses in Guelph were saying, boy, I wish I knew the community or the neighborhoods around the downtown. What type, are they professional people? Are they people that could shop in the downtown? What kind of shops would we want to attract into the downtown? Are those standard reports, or is that where you're trying to head with this pilot project, to be able to give, let's say, business improvement areas information on the neighborhoods around them so that we can have the right types of retail opportunities?
Well, I think you're pointing out exactly the kinds of questions that Canadians are asking of us, associations, businesses, social support groups, et cetera. They're saying, just giving me the data for Vancouver isn't good enough. What do I do with that? Because I know that Surrey looks very different than Richmond and, downtown Vancouver. And so those data don't help me expand my markets or even understand if I do put something, will people be able to actually consume the product? What, you see the kind of the changes in demographics, immigration, et cetera, even knowing what are the tastes and habits of people in that area and how are they changing over time and how do different subgroups in that area consume products and services differently than others. And that's what this project is designed to do.
But
is to
again,
help.
there is a wall. So we can't know what address has what. And when I was in business, I would have loved to know which paper mill was no longer going to be buying my
Statistics
product.
Canada, you won't.
So I couldn't get to the paper mill. I couldn't get to the level of detail. I could only get aggregated detail. And in terms of policy, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and that's again, when I say, we take the privacy of Canadians very seriously, it's not just to trust me, it's actually processes and procedures in place.
Thank you very
Fantastic.
much. We're going to move back to Mr. Albus. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to go and go back to your opening statement. You said that the chance that a given address is selected as part of our sample is 1 in 28. The chance that the dwelling is used in the actual sample is 1 in 40. So to me, that seems to say that you're actually oversampling. Is that the case? Do you really need 500,000 households?
So, one, we don't want the banks to even know which dwellings are going to be in the sample.
By what ratio are you going to be oversampling? How many Canadians do you actually need for this project to go forward, and why are you using 500,000?
So what we need in order to make sure that we have enough information for our census areas, the neighborhood levels essentially, we need about 350,000 dwellings. But the design of the project to include this, even the providers of that data don't know which dwellings are going to be used
You're
in the
going to
sample.
be asking for confidential information that people back home are upset about, sir, and you only need 350,000 households, and you're going to be sampling 500,000? To me, that is, I appreciate you answering the question, but I'm disappointed to hear that. Now, when it comes to the actual retention of your data, you talked about having the two different areas and how they're separate. Will Statistics Canada maintain a master key that can re-identify the information?
So we will keep, as I said, the two files, as you explained. So the identifiable information with the StatCan number, that information comes in, the StatCan number and the actual financial transactions, that come in. Once we have associated that transaction, so the expenditures that me and my family have.
Will you be able to re-engineer using a master key to reunite those files if you so chose?
So if
Yes
there is
or
a
no?
policy need for us to be able to do that, we have a very controlled process in place. It is
So it sounds like the answer is yes. Okay, so will Statistics Canada maintain a technical capability to access the data with personal identifiers after anonymizing the data?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Will you maintain the technical capability to access data with personal identifiers after anonymizing the data? So if you have a master key, will you have the ability to bring those files back together at some point in the future?
One, there are no fishing expeditions here. Anybody that when we have a specific policy need to be able to link that to another source, a case has to be made, that case has to be looked at and agreed to. Whatever that other sources with that key is joined together, and only the anonymized microdata is given to the area that needs to do that
So I understand the
work.
separation, but why would you not remove the records that have personal identifiers after anonymizing the data?
Well,
Why not delete it?
So essentially, there are retention periods for files such as this. This is still a pilot project. We are trying to assess exactly what is the short-term and the long-term need for these data. And again, to your point earlier about 500,000 dwellings, just as I said, that is out of a universe of 14 million households that we have in Canada, and a fresh sample is selected every year so that we cannot create a file that keeps that transaction for even the selected
to do this scheme,
households.
you're going to have to require the use of the banks. And obviously, the banks don't have the infrastructure to make that information available. Now, you've also talked about real-time and frequency, higher frequency use of the information. Are you going to be seeking to port the information through an API directly to Statistics Canada from the banks themselves? And will this be required of other institutions? Will it be also put upon credit unions, ATB in Alberta, trust companies that do deposit taking activities?
So at the moment, the pilot project is restricted to 9 institutions, and we have secure transfer protocols that meet all the Government of Canada standards for secure transfer, and that is how we're bringing the data into Statistics Canada. As you can imagine, we have millions of transactions with Canadians where they're providing us with their privacy, they're really, really confidential and sensitive data. So we use the same protocols that we get to bring that data into Statistics Canada, and we have processes within Statistics Canada that we built over 100 years with input from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner.
Yeah, but you didn't build the infrastructure for this real time. And again, when someone fills out their census, sir, they know exactly what they're doing. They know that, in this case, you're not even advising them that this information may be taken. What if someone moves from one area to another and then ends up being sampled a second time?
Mr. Albus, I
this
hate
is
to tell you, but you're out of time.
In someone's
We are going to move
data,
to
and I believe government should not have
Mr.
that power.
David Graham. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. To Mr. Albus's question, would households be in any way informed that the data could be collected?
Yes, that's what we expect the institutions to tell their clients.
Okay.
And we made that very clear in August to them, that we asked them to say, this is part of our process. We want to operate in a transparent way.
So it's not done in some magical background way. So I appreciate that. Would it be accurate to say that the 500,000 households collected for 350,000 samples used is to ensure that the data is properly blinded?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question. Maybe the microphone is just a little further away.
Or just me, that also happens.
Sorry.
Would it be accurate to say that the 500,000 households collected for only 350,000 used is to ensure that the data is properly blinded?
That is simply to make sure that even the institutions who are providing us that information don't know which records were actually used. So it's noise, if you like, to further protect the privacy and confidentiality of the.
And that's a standard methodology.
Many times we use that methodology to mask, if you like, from the receipt from the person providing that information, not knowing and being able to replicate that kind of analysis.
Understood. To Mr. Lloyd's question, what's the legal basis of your ability to compel data without consent?
So Section 13 of the Statistics Act is the actual provision, and that makes it very clear that for statistical purposes only, we have the right to go and seek administrative.
And how long has that been on the books?
Well, that's been there since the inception of the Statistics Act, at least since 1971, if not even earlier than that.
Do European countries' statistical agencies have the power to compel data in spite of the GDPR?
Yes, they do. In fact, the GDPR has a carve-out in various sections for statistical purposes.
Okay. Mr. Lloyd asked earlier if someone sent you a letter saying, I don't want my data used, would you even be able to identify the data as theirs to take it out?
It would be a lot of gymnastics to go find out whether their individual record or the household would be, because as I said, once the linkages are made, those linkages are put away in a vault, and we're dealing with the individual record in an anonymized fashion after that point.
Do the banks already have the information that you're requesting from them?
Yes, they're the source of this information, yes.
Can the banks use that information in any way and for any purpose other than to simply process the transactions?
I couldn't speak to what the banks can or can't do. I don't know what their policies and procedures and processes are.
That's fair. The businesses need the improved data that would come out of this research. Could the banks themselves benefit from this aggregated data?
Well, sure. The banks use this to expand their client base as well, and they obviously are impacted by, inflation and CPI and interest rates and consumption patterns of households. Even the formula on which a mortgage gets approved or denied is based on household leveraging and income and so on. So yes, the banks very much are use this data, and I think they will also benefit from the strengthened, lower level of geography and more timely data.
Are some banks
at the aggregate level? Again, they would never be able to get at who said what.
in your opinion, are some banks concerned that other banks might be able to benefit from their data being in the pool?
I don't see how.
So,
Sorry, you
well,
mean...
so if a big bank sends in data, then a small bank or a credit union might say, "Wow, look at this great data that we got from Stats Canada from banks." So is that providing a competitive advantage to the smaller banks, and is that why the bigger banks are worried?
I mean, the data that we get from them would never be shared at that aggregate, other
No,
than
but
at the
the
aggregate
results of
level.
the data.
But the results would be available for everybody, all Canadians. So that's why we collect it. We don't collect it for us. We collect it to share it with all Canadians.
But can you mentioned
In aggregate form, again.
right? You talked about declining response rates of the old system. Can you explain how the old system actually worked?
Sure. I mean, this is one example. Okay, so as I said, there are a number of changes that are happening in today's society that require us to move in this direction. So the previous one of the surveys was the survey of household spending. So we used to go out to 20,000 households. We used to actually give them a diary to keep track, and we still have. We put the project on we suspended that project right now. And individuals had to actually, take their salary and log every single expenditure with the receipts and be able to take their salary and calculate it to about a 2 to 3% kind of variance. And in many cases, we found that they didn't know, or they didn't have the receipts, they weren't completing it. And this is, it's a growing problem that we've had. Now, 60% of those that we go to either refuse or don't give us access to, to them.
5 seconds left, so very one quick question.
You have no
Did
seconds left. Thank you very much.
Two.
We're going to move to the final 2 minutes. Monsieur Boulris, vous avez les 2 dernières minutes.
You've got the final 2 minutes. Thank you. I have 2 questions. Earlier you said that you had no intention you intended to communicate with Canadians about this pilot project and to consult them and let them know, but I didn't hear a great deal of detail on how you plan to go about that. Well, as I said earlier, we are still developing this pilot project. We wish to work with institutions as well as the Commissioner to really develop this communications plan. Of course, there is an element during which the institutions themselves will be contacting their clients, and we will be informing Canadians. We have already placed several documents on our website, and we are planning several information sessions to answer Canadians' questions and explain to them why it's necessary and how we plan to protect their privacy and the confidentiality of their personal information. So how many information sessions? 3, 5, 30, 50? You don't know? Well, given the level of current concern, yes, we do plan to increase the number of sessions, of course, as well as the level of information they require. My second question is, we are living in a virtual digital world in which there are many people who wish to do harm, hackers, who want to hack into systems and collect information and use it for various means. Recently, we saw that with Facebook, who certainly has the means to hire people who should be able to protect people's information and their pages. I'm sorry, Mr. Boulris, but you're already out of time. Already? 2 minutes went by so quickly. Oh, it was such a good question.
We've had a lot of discussion here, and the Chief Statistician should be commended for coming. That being said, even he, in his testimony today, has pointed out that there are various aspects of this pilot project, so-called pilot project, and
Order that you're doing?
no, I just wanted to see that because we're in the business of discussing this particular topic, that I'd like to see if to move the following motion, that further to the appearance of the Chief Statistician, that the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology invite the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, the Privacy Commissioner, TransUnion, and the Canadian Bankers Association so we can have further discussion on this important topic, sir.
1 second, please. Actually, that was a motion that we dealt with in committee on Monday, so it's not something that we can do.
Mr. Chair, I would simply point that, first of all, it's a motion relating to this, and it's an invitation, not a study, and that also we have TransUnion is included in this. That was not in the original motion that you're referring to. And if you won't find it in order, I'd like to know, because then I would like to make it as a formal notice of motion.
Again, that motion was, the substantive motion was dealt with in committee, so I will rule against that.
Okay. Well, I'd like to put a notice of motion, Mr. Chair, that further to the appearance of the Chief Statistician, that the Standing Committee of Industry, Science and Technology invite the Minister of Innovation, the Privacy Commissioner, TransUnion, the Canadian Bankers Association, and Kavukian, and the Canadian Civil Liberties Union. And I would hope that that would be translated and that we would have an opportunity to discuss this motion. But again, I'm not asking for a report. I'm asking an invitation. And I would hope that members would say that more discussion is necessary. Mr. Longfield said the other day specifically that we can't discuss this further until we've heard from the Chief Statistician.
So you submitted your notice of motion, and the clerk will have that and translate that. Unfortunately, today, we really don't have time to do anything because there is a second committee that's taking over here, and that's what I needed to confirm. No, they need, because it's the HUMA, and it's all about accessibility, there's a certain setup that's required here, and they need half an hour. The clerk's back there. We actually just verified that with the clerk, that they need half an hour. So, Mr. Chonk.
Mr. Chair, I just want to support my colleague. Obviously, he can't represent the exact same motion, but if the motion is different, I hope you will rule it in order. I think it's really important that we do hear from additional witnesses on this matter. You know, when we first established the census in Canada hundreds of years ago, it was entirely for the use of government itself to raise armies or to collect taxes. But with the development of the modern economy, the census is now, the data that StatsCan is collecting, the census data, is used by private sector corporations, and Canadians are increasingly concerned about the development of large data being used by companies like Facebook, Google, and the banks. And the issue, I think, in front of us as a committee is whether or not it's appropriate for the federal government to use the coercive power of the state to compel banks to hand over very personal and granular financial information.
You're actually getting into debate.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go into debate right now.
So I hope you rule it in order.
We've accepted the notice of motion that you've put forward to the clerk. It'll get translated, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Again, Mr. Chair, if I could just have your clarity on this, exactly why you ruled the previous one out of order, because it was based on the conversation of the business of the committee here today, and it was substantially different in that we were not talking about a study, but having invited, just the same as the Liberal members did last time. I can't see why you would rule this out of order. I'd like an explanation.
I haven't ruled your notice of motion out of order.
No, but the previous...
I ruled the first one out of order because we actually dealt with the substantive motion in committee business. So I can't really have that conversation out of committee business because it's in committee business. So you've put forward a new motion, notice of motion. We'll deal with that as it comes. As it stands right now, I just want to point out that no motions were passed to get the statistician here. There was an ask for unanimous consent to bring the statistician in and have a conversation with him. That was the ask. It wasn't a motion regarding a study, regarding anything. It was very specific. Do we have unanimous consent to have the chief statistician come in? It was unanimous. Everybody agreed with it, and that's why the gentleman is here today. So that's the business that we are doing today.
Yes, and again, that's why I suggested that we should do something similar, because it's we were just doing the business here, Mr. Chair. It is clearly tied to the business of the committee today, and so I can't see why it wouldn't be in order. That being said, we will just prepare ourselves for future meetings where we will be taking a much different approach until we have this issue looked at, and I do hope that colleagues consider that. Thank you.
No problem. On that note, I'd like to thank our guests for coming in today. It was very enlightening, and we look forward to To the next time we meet, we are adjourned.